Educating, informing, serving. Hvac TV, keeping government honest.
Okay. Review and approve board minutes of March 14th. Priscilla?
Under adjustments to agenda, it should say that Priscilla asked for the MOU to be added, and David Clark objected, and it was not added. Under election of clerk, it should say Jason Terry made a motion for the chair to cast one ballot to appoint June. Under teacher and support staff negotiations, Molly only appointed Pam Spurlock, not Priscilla Lambert and Deb Wright. And under SIP team, I had a question. I do not have Jason as being SIP team, so he'd have to tell me whether he was or not.
I was not.
Not, so Jason's not either. That should be taken off.
Any other corrections to the March 14th minutes? Can I have a motion to approve the minutes as corrected?
This is Margot. I'll make a motion to accept the minutes from March 14th as amended.
Thank you, Margot. So there's a motion on the floor to approve the minutes as corrected. And let's do a roll call for a vote. Margot?
Yes.
Deb Wright?
Aye.
Pam?
Yes.
June?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Brenda?
Yes.
Priscilla?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. So we have 8B. You have your student here that would like to present?
Sure.
Thank you.
I may just need a minute here, Molly.
I'm sorry.
I may need a minute just to get it so I can share my screen. Yeah. I got it.
Andy, can you tell us what you have on the screen? Is this something that was presented?
So
to you?
this is a presentation by Grace Juarez.
So we have Grace. Grace is right here. Grace is going to present a presentation on Black Lives Matter.
Yep, you gotta talk loud.
Okay.
All right, so let me get this into presenter mode. Don't worry about that.
Are we ready?
Yep.
Go ahead.
So, hi, my name is Grace Warriors. Thank you for having me. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a junior here at Bellswell Junior High School. This is taking a stand against racism, a proposal to raise the Black Lives Matter flag at BFUHS. Next slide. So I introduced this idea to the Wnsu Diversity and Equity Committee June of 2021, and they advised me to put this idea forth to the Student Council, which I'm a member of, so I was able to do that. And I would also like to add that I'm a part of Vermont Student Anti-Racism Network. Next slide. So why put the Black Lives Matter flag up? Well, support for the Black, Indigenous, people of color citizens in our community. And racism is still a big issue in our community. However, we are a white majority community. And so people tend to think racism isn't an issue, but issues are just swept under the rug and aren't paid attention to. Next slide. Where would the flag go? On the flagpole in front of the high school, specifically the one that also holds the Vermont state flag, and it would be under the Vermont state flag. Next slide. For how long? The duration of the school year, August, September, whenever the school year starts, until June of every school year. This is so it's not performative activism, but we're really taking a stand to show the support and our beliefs. Next slide.
Oh, sorry.
Funding, a flag has already been donated, so that's been taken care of. Next slide. When I presented this to the student council, 2/3 of the student council showed up to that particular meeting, and no opposition was received. I sent a petition around the school and it received about 92 signatures. Other communities in Vermont that have done this is Colchester, Burlington, South Burlington, Montpelier, and Brattleboro, and that doesn't count the other communities that have tried to put this through. Thank you for your time. That's my presentation. So thank you.
I'm gonna let someone in real quick, so
Mhm.
I just don't want anyone to get cut off, so. You should be good.
Can we see the other people? Please. Does any board member have any questions for Grace? Go ahead, Jim.
I do. You say you got 92 signatures. Is that 92 signatures of students who currently attend Bellas Falls Union High
That
School?
is signatures from students who are currently.
All 92 signatures?
There were a couple of teacher ones, but I excluded those in my count.
So 92 is the signature count.
Yes.
And Mr. Broadley, how many students do we have here at the high school?
Currently, I believe it's 305 right now. Just tell you exactly.
Well, Mr. Bradley's getting that.
Yeah.
Is there any other questions from any board members? David?
I have a question. And been around for a while. I don't recall that we have run any other flags up the flagpole. So I'm just curious whether administration is aware of any past practice or policy that might possibly address this situation. It's a very interesting ask. And I'm a big believer that there should be some consistency as to how we would consider applying these rules. And I spoke with a few people here tonight, and not really in jest, saying that maybe we ought to be considering running that yellow and light blue Ukrainian flag up our flagpole as well. I would be reluctant to do so, or at least make the suggestion without having really had a thorough conversation around it first. So it's very, very interesting what you're proposing here, Grace. Very interesting. And I think that it's something that this board needs to give consideration to. But I think that that it's a matter that should have a consistent application. That's why.
Yes, so I have thought about that, whether that be conservatives or other people who have issues that have flags that they want to put up, like progress flags, like the flag on the wall over there. I've heard people want to put up Trump flags or anything of that. But if people can think that they can go through the right processes and channels to put up their flag, I don't see the problem with that, as long as they can do it in the correct manner.
Jason, do you have any comments?
No.
Brenda?
I don't know when to David Clark's comment. I don't know where that would end. We have a lot of military people. Why don't we have the flags up for MIA, POW, veterans? I mean, there's lots of groups of people represented in our community. And I don't know, I am somewhat familiar with DBLM, but is the flag the one with the fist
No,
and the sickle?
I'm not familiar with any sickle. The fist symbol is on some flags, but the official Black Lives Matter flag is a black flag with white print that says Black Lives Matter.
Thank you for clarifying that, because in the school handbook, ways of violence, you're not allowed to wear those things or put posters up, and that would be offensive to me if that was done. Because most of the flags I see with that have a clenched black fist. Well, I don't know if it's a black fist, but a clenched fist. And that's activism to me, and that's a problem.
I understand that some people have a problem with that. That fist is the Black Power symbol. I would just like.
I believe it used to be the Panthers. I mean, there's so many groups of people that would love to fly a flag. This is an academic institution, not a political or religious organization. In the handbook, we're not even allowed to put religious posters up in the school. And so, in my opinion, just my opinion, the Black Lives Matter has a lot of connotations to it, some political, some are religious. In some ways, people call it a cult for religion by definition. And I appreciate your passion for to eliminate, or to not eliminate, I guess we can't eliminate the way humans act with each other, but to bring down any diversity with people. But I just was wondering, to that point, where would it end? How many flags would we fly?
Well,
Like-
again, if, let's say it's, as your example, Ukrainian flag, if someone wants a Ukrainian flag up, they can go through the processes of presenting it to, student body, because I presented it as a student policy issue. Then going through, making a presentation, presenting it to the school board, going through those right processes and channels. I don't see why anyone can't do that with any flag they want.
We will have a school full of flagpoles. I don't know, I'm so sorry I hope I'm presenting what I'm thinking, and it's my thinking. I don't represent any group. But the presentation lacks some substance about the organization itself.
Of the Black Lives Matter movement.
Yeah.
Well, the movement is to bring attention to discrimination and systemic and systematic racism that still is present throughout our country. That is the goal behind it, is to bring equality. It's not saying Black lives are superior over white or white are superior over Black, because no one is superior over anybody based on their skin color or gender orientation, sexual orientation, any of that matter. It's to bring awareness to no lives will matter unless you establish that people who have a different skin color other than white, that their lives matter as well. And it's bringing attention to that.
Priscilla,
Yeah, being considerate of all people is very important. And I appreciate you coming to the school board and presenting. It leaves us with a whole lot of things to think about. I appreciated Brenda's comments. I appreciate the other comments that are being made, because it made me think. And it's making me think about, possibilities of other things and all the different issues that could be surrounding any action that we take as a board. So I think it deserves a lot of thought. I think there's a lot more that needs to be done before we come to any conclusions. But I do appreciate everything that you brought to us. Thank you.
Jason, you said you had something?
Yeah, just listening to David and Brenda and June and Priscilla, and we did the pledge at first, Molly, and it's the first time we've done it at the high school level, and I think we should do it every day at the high school. I hope to put that on next month's agenda, but the Brenda's comments with all the flags, and doesn't the pledge cover all of that? It's one nation, for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I mean, those are the words in the Pledge of Allegiance, justice for all. And I think if we go back to basics and, just go back to common sense. I think that we start there. We start with, basics of what we're trying to accomplish. And, I believe in a pledge, and I believe in a national anthem, and I believe in our country. So, thank you.
I
Thank you.
do appreciate that point brought up. I was actually thinking about this earlier. With the pledge, it says it stands for certain things in the country, and I think this is a great country in many ways. However, there are some problems with the pledge. I believe it was 1954. That was when they added under God. Not everyone believes in God. So there's that problem. But also it says liberty and justice for all. If you look at statistics of incarceration rates and rates against who police brutality is, targeted to, you'll see that that's not a very true statement. And until we can bring attention to that and make that statement true.
Deb Wright, do you have any questions or comments?
My comment is, as a Native American whose home was flooded by invaders, I don't see anyone saying Native Americans' lives matter. So my concern is that I agree with David Clark that we need serious consideration. There's no particular policy about this. And I think that sort of thing needs to be done before we allow, in an educational setting, any and all different people's specific opinions that basically dominates others' opinions in an educational setting.
Thank you. Yep, Margot, you're next.
I would like to suggest, while I think this is an incredibly important issue and one that I am so glad that you brought to us, Grace. I think it's allowing the board to think about some policies that we do not currently have on the books and would be good for us to think about. I would like to suggest that the high school policy committee meet and discuss a policy and then have procedures set up so that it's an equitable discussion and clear moving forward if, we are to address other flags or that want to be flown. I think to do so in isolation would cause maybe some challenges in the future. But that if we have a clear policy as well as a procedure in place that any group has to follow, then we can easily say, yes, this meets our criteria or it does not. So that'd be my suggestion for moving forward. I'd like to keep this on the table so that we have a chance to discuss it in the future once we are able to meet, make a policy, and have some steps put in place for procedures.
Pam, you're next.
Hi. I really want to echo what Margot just said. Definitely want to see about quickly bringing this to the policy committee and making sure that we can make this equitable and accessible for all people. But Grace, I want to commend you on your presentation, your research, all the work that you put toward this and your advocacy, especially your own personal time that you do to our state. Thank you for that work and for speaking up when it can be so hard. I also appreciate how you made sure that you didn't want it to just seem performative and that it really was coming from the correct and right place. I appreciate that. Presenting to 2/3 of the student population, gathering 92 signatures, at least of the students, and those are the ones you could gather, because some people would be silent. But thank you for sharing and not being silent and giving a voice to those who otherwise do not. Thank you, Grace.
Thank you.
So I'm last, as always. All lives matter. That's as simple as that. Any public comments?
Before we get into that, if there are public comments, we're going to need folks to stand closer to the
owl device over by Brenda, just so it can pick up your voice. I'm gonna let someone in. I think. Nope, there isn't. Okay.
Molly, just a point of order. There was a question asked at the beginning of this, how many students, and we did not get that information.
So on the record as of today, there's 302 students.
Thank you.
It was 92. Yeah.
Oh, a third.
About 30%.
Okay. Would anybody like to speak to this before the board decides on taking action?
Yeah, I just want to thank you all for this, and my thought is, of course, when Oak Glory was made, it was made with the intention of having everybody under it. Every group, ethnic group, religious group, whatever. Though we may not live in a perfect republic, that does not take away what that flag means. And to put one group's flag underneath that one, I think would really do harm to what we as Americans believe, and that is that all of us are equal, and all of us are together. So to me, that flag hits it all, and we don't need any other groups underneath it. And you all know me. I have a flag that I fly under, but I wouldn't ask the high school to put it under it. So.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I do. I'm sorry, excuse me, Mike, for the record, we need names and of that as people speak, so.
All right, I'm Harold Norris from Athens.
Thank you, sorry, just thought of it. Anyone interrupt you?
Paul, can you come around here or come up closer to one of these owl things?
Paul Vanek, and my first and most concern is that you will be setting precedents. And as educators, I think there's a much higher task at taking care of a whole school. 92 signatures is not a majority. If we keep our basic rules of government going. So that's a second concern. Thirdly is you cannot put that flag or any other flag under the national flag.
I would like to say that I did add that it.
I know
was
you
the
did, but
Vermont
I just want to
state flag.
reiterate it because it's a concern of mine. Nor do I believe should it be under the Vermont flag. Why should it? The Vermont flag stand for your beliefs? I don't know that. It's supposed to stand for a state. The state should decide, or at least this facility and its bodies should decide. But where will it end? What group comes next? How many will we allow?
As I said in the
And
beginning.
if this flag, as the gentleman before me, stands for what we all know it does and was created to stand for, what's the additional layer really mean? It's an interest group, it's an advertisement, it's a slogan, and even it won't even stop at supporting another country like Ukraine. What if a business says, hey, we just found some free advertisement on a pole out in front of a Podunk High School in Vermont? I really don't see any end to this.
Unfortunately, Black Lives Matter is not an advertisement. It's advocacy for, the end to racism. In addition to your comment on the 92 signatures, I am aware that is not close to a majority. And I understand some of it was social pressure because it was given out in homerooms. And if I was to do this again, I would suggest an anonymous ballot where people can feel more comfortable not doing it openly, I guess, in front of their peers if they have that social pressure or social anxiety, as Pamela Johnson had mentioned earlier. Not everyone is able to use their voice, but anonymously, you would be shocked at the things people can stand up for.
You mentioned earlier that there is racism here, and that basically says to me that you would believe it exists in this room right now.
It does. Earlier today, actually, someone in this room said within earshot of me that Black lives do not matter. I heard that with my own ears in the lunchroom this morning.
So what you're doing is you're paintbrushing an entire audience with the feelings of one spoken individual. And I don't agree with that. I don't appreciate the accusation myself, but I'll stay there and not take that any
I
further.
did not mean
Just
to
know
accuse anyone of being
that's
racist.
an accusation.
Okay, so you have to let them speak and then you can,
So I think you can tell that I don't feel that this flag represents what you intended to do. What say you to the people who walk into this building for very differing reasons and purposes and events that will look at that and may be offended or uncomfortable or not enter because of that flag? Isn't that what you're trying to stop?
that's okay.
It's okay if you don't answer, but that's.
No, I was
Thank you.
thinking of a response.
Yes.
I
Oh, sorry.
think of
So
One of-
Grace, you don't need to justify it. We're just taking public comment right now.
This is true. I'm not.
We're
I'm
just
not
taking
waiting for a
public comment.
response.
Again, this matter is heavily opinions of individuals, which we respect them all, but you don't need to respond.
I just
Okay?
want you to consider it.
Yes,
Enough
thank
said.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Is there any other comments? If none,
I have a comment.
yes,
I would just like to ask Grace if her intention was to exclude anyone or to make them not enter this building.
My intention was not to, it was actually quite the opposite. I aim to make everyone feel safe here and make them feel that they are welcome and that we will not tolerate anything discriminatory. That was my intention. Thank you.
So I asked the same question and you were told you didn't have to answer that. Now you've answered the same question. Which
I
is,
wasn't coming at her.
I was a speaker, just as you are now.
okay, so let's keep it to public comments, okay? Let them speak and we won't, there's no need to respond to public comments.
Chuck Lawrence, 10 Westminster. Isn't it a little insensitive for us to speak for another race? I don't see anybody here representing another race asking us to do this. Are you sure? Are you sure that they want this? And that it's not going to drive a wedge further and create more animosity than we already have? And I don't disagree with you. It does exist. And I don't think signaling anybody out is going to make it better. It's going to make it worse. What we need to do is bring people together, not separate them further. That's what that was all about. A lot of good people died for that flag. From Indians, black people, white people, Polish, Jewish, it doesn't matter. They all died for that flag, for the same cause that you're fighting for. And I'm afraid that what you're doing is going to make it worse, not better. And I understand what you're doing is under good intentions. I'm just afraid that at the end of the day, it's not going to get the goal you're looking for. That's my fear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Anybody on the board?
I
Annie?
don't see anyone up there.
So I do believe that as a board, that this does need to go into a policy, but for tonight, I believe that there's some action needs to be taken as a board on whether right now, whether you're going to fly a Black Lives Matter flag on the flagpole for the rest of the school year or not. David?
Well, with all due respect to the chair, I'm going to suggest that we don't take action tonight because I think it's been pointed out around the table, possibly the room as well, that we need to consider, both policy and of course the implications of what policy will cause to happen. And I'm saying this because I don't think that we need to deny permission, simply not granting it has the immediate effect of not granting that permission.
So David is called the chair. What do the board members think?
I would like to make a motion to.
Well, we gotta accept that you're,
Oh,
he has called out the chair and said that we're not gonna have a motion, so now it's up to the board members to vote on whether we are or not. Am I doing that correctly, Andy? I believe I am.
Oh, Molly, I'll stand down. If someone wants to put a motion on the floor, by all means, they should. I simply expressed an opinion here as a caution to the chair, but that doesn't mean that a motion is not in order.
June had the floor before you.
I would like to make a motion that we, as a board, do not allow Life Matter flag to fly at the high school. At the Bellas Falls Junior High School.
A motion has been made to not allow the Black Lives Matter flag to be flown at the Bellas Falls Union High School. Is there any other discussion from board members?
Do you need a second for that?
No, we're small boards.
This is Margot. I would personally feel more comfortable with postponing a decision on this particular matter and readdressing it at a future meeting after the policy committee and a procedure has been discussed and accepted by the board to address any matters of this nature that come to the board instead of singling out this particular issue.
This is Pamela. I agree as well with Margot. I think this needs to go to policy and should not be voted preemptively before we can create a policy concerning such matters.
Molly,
So
may I just let Deb write in? I don't want to cut anyone off, so I'm just.
So this is discussion under a motion. There's already a motion on the floor.
Can I move to table the motion? That's it. That'll suffice for them.
Deb, do you have any comments?
He was connecting to audio. She might not have heard you.
There's a motion on the floor to table the motion.
Well, you gotta, you have to vote on the motion or accept the amendment to the motion.
So is that an amendment?
It's not an amendment. You table the motion. When you move to table the motion, that takes over all business that's on the floor. It's consideration of a motion that lies on the table.
So Priscilla has asked to table this motion. And let's call a vote. Margot,
Wait, which motion are we voting to table the motion or voting to, I'm sorry.
Table.
Are we allowed to talk about the Priscilla's motion?
I'm
We just
looking it
gotta vote
up.
on it.
You lay the, can I read this? Okay.
sure.
You lay the motion, the pending motion aside temporarily when something else has arisen or when there is something else that you do not want to discuss at the moment. A majority has the power to halt consideration of a question immediately without debate. Such action does violate the right of the minority and individual members if it is for any purpose than the one stated in the first sentence of this section, which is simply to lay it aside for the moment.
So my understanding is that she's called to table the motion and we have to vote on that table. And if that does not get approved, then we go back to the motion. Am I right? I'm getting a man shaking his head here.
Yeah.
I thought I knew, but here we go. There's a motion on the floor to table this motion right now. Margot, how do you vote on tabling the motion?
Yes.
Deborah?
Yes.
I want to say something, but
At the same point, this was not listed as an item for action per se. It was a presentation. It didn't say we would discuss it and make a motion on it. I don't understand.
My turn. One of our members of this board made a motion after the presentation, and it was on the agenda under new business. And it says for discussion / action, if any. How would you vote on the
So you're
table?
saying- Okay, well, then I'm gonna say table it.
Pam,
I say yes, table it.
June,
No.
Jason,
No.
David,
Yes.
Brenda,
No,
Priscilla,
Where are we at?
Priscilla, you tabled the motion, please vote.
Yes.
5.
Molly is a no.
5 table.
5 to table, 4 to not table. The motion has been tabled until next month's, next meeting. It's not next month, it's end of the month.
I didn't give a time frame.
I just didn't.
Madam Chair?
Yes,
Can I
sir.
raise a point of order, a question, as a citizen voter? Who's the chair of this meeting?
That, I think is me.
We'd like to see some more of that. I would. A lot of challenges to the chair. Let's leave it.
So any other communication, public meeting, public comments before we turn to reports?
Communication and public comment.
Yes,
This is on a different topic,
yes.
if I may. Okay, so I'm Cheryl Charles. I chair the Westminster Board. And I see that on the agenda tonight is the topic of teacher contracts. And as a member of the negotiations committee and the spokesperson for that committee, I'm simply here to offer information should that be helpful to the board.
Thank you.
Quite interesting.
I'd like to move to the superintendent's report, please.
Can we just wait a minute? Just people- That noise will just cancel out everything, so.
Sorely tempted.
You're up when you're ready,
Yeah,
Andy.
I'm just pulling it up, sorry. Apologize. So just wanted to update the board. So today we put out a new protocol that our school nurses will use around COVID. And if someone is symptomatic in school. And so a lot of that has to do just with us making sure that we have information for consent for testing. And then if we don't have consent, the nurses will call home. And essentially just the steps that we'll take using antigen tests and using the LAMP test, which is a PCR test. Just pause for a second. That door's shut. The PCR test, which is gives us a more accurate read, and then just the steps of what we're going through. Basically, a lot of it is treating it very similar to we've always treated any illness in school. But the big message is if somebody is sick, we're saying stay home. You know, don't send your kid to school when they're sick, because the infection rate of any illness is up. You know, we're already seeing an uptick in not in COVID, but we're seeing like the common cold and the flu, right? So for 2 years we've been wearing masks, and now we're starting to see folks, you know, catch the regular colds. So then just let everyone know with the business office, we're continuing to work with Glenn Hankinson, who's a retired business manager, and Casey Boyle Eldridge, who's a retired accountant. They're continuing to help us out and get our books in order. We have hired a new business manager, Jim Vazina. He is ending up his time as the Hartford School District Business Manager, and he will be officially joining us May 1st. But we are working things out where he's already been spending time working with Glenn, working with Casey, and getting familiar with the folks in our business office so that on May 1st, he's not just starting cold. So we're excited to have him come in. He's got years of experience. He's been at Hartford for 10 years. You know, having someone with Vermont experience in the business office, we think is really important. Also, Glenn provided me, and I sent it out to the board just like probably around 5 o'clock, and that's when I got it, is just an actual versus the budget with revenue in it. So if you could take a look at it, and we can next meeting, I can discuss it more in depth if you have questions around certain things. The caveat is we're still working on the FY22, basically our books and getting it in the right order. And so we're still finding there are some things that are coded wrong. And so we are taking care of it.
Shoot.
Thank you, Deb. So there might be some mistakes and whatnot, so just know that, but we can try and work through and answer those questions. Wednesday, we are interviewing for the Director of Innovation and Instruction. Committee met last week, and we are going to be sitting down on Wednesday and interviewing folks and hopefully have someone in place for next year. Our schools, I've asked each school to revisit their emergency plans, given the fact that we've had some, the high school had one here. We've spent so much time focusing on COVID the last 2 years that we need to get back to, the normal looking at our emergency plans. And then we'll be updating all the plans and the SU plans. And then we are working on our summer programming. I know that John and his staff have been working, and we'll have things for credit recovery and whatnot for the kids here at the high school. So, and that's all I got.
Jason.
Andy, on the document that came out from at 5 o'clock about the COVID and the masking and whatever, who was that from, the state or from the nurses, or
So
something you guys has put together?
Yeah, so it's from the state, and then we took it and looked at it and adjusted a couple of things for us. And it's just on protocols. It's not about masking, other than if someone tests positive for COVID, they're going to be asked to wear a mask while we're waiting for them to get picked up.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I read it quick before I got here, but I thought I saw something that said if you don't get permission from your parent, you're going to be asked to go home or something like that.
Correct.
How's that work?
We would, so I can pull it up and tell you exactly what it says, but basically, if we can't get permission to test the student, then they're ill of something, and so they're going to be sent home. I mean, that's what we would do with any student.
So if I have a cough or a stuffy nose, or it could be allergy season, and you say to a student, I would like to test you for COVID, and the student's like, no, I have allergies, and then who's the fall on to say, well, I think you have COVID, you got to go home? How does that work?
So the guidelines are coming out of the Vermont Department of Health. So it's not something that anyone is just created. It's something that we spent some time looking at and they've looked at. So let me pull it up just so.
David's got to go home with his cough.
Again, it's not as.
I cough all the time.
I'm not trying to make light of it.
I'll be honest with you, Jason. No, I'm going to be honest, because I think our healthcare professionals have worked their butts off this year.
Oh, I agree.
And we have been challenged throughout the entire year, because when we call home and a child is symptomatic and the arguments from parents, our healthcare professionals do not take it light, and they don't say, oh, you've got a cough, you just cough one time, go home.
Okay.
And that representation, even to our public, makes it seem like this is light. And so, and with all respect, you and I have had lots of conversations.
I just wanted to hear you say that,
Yeah.
so I'm good. I think the nurses have been great.
And it's not as simple as a kid's got a, a ruddy nose, and so all of a sudden we're gonna send the kid home. They're gonna go through steps and procedures and use their professionalism to look at what the testing is. And if a student has had COVID, we can't use a PCR test at 90 days because they end up always testing positive. So we have to use an antigen test. The vast majority of our students, we already have waivers to go ahead and test those kids. And so it's a conversation we're going to have with the families. But a student has to present multiple symptoms for any illness. And so I'm going to take COVID out of it a little bit, because if a kid's got a runny nose and a sore throat and they're coughing and hacking, that student should be at home, right? And so that's really what it's more about. It's not about it. We did speak with the school nurses about the potential of being a facility to test for flu and strep throat and all that stuff, because we have the ability to do all that. We don't have the bandwidth to do that right now. And so we're kind of putting that on hold. But no one's going to say to a student, just because they have a cough, you need to go home. But it's a conversation we want to have with families at that time when the student is presenting symptoms in the office.
And again, I just want to echo, I think the nurses have been great. I think people here have been doing a really good job with it. I'm sure it's not easy. And again, it goes back to common sense. If you're sick, stay home.
May I ask a question to this?
Mhm.
Who pays for these tests?
The state does. We haven't paid for a single test at this time. The state's been providing us all of our, when we started out with the surveillance testing, the PCR tests, the state was providing that. They provided all the antigen tests when we did the test at home program. We did test to stay program first. The state provided those. The test at home they provided. The LAMP test, which is I would say it's a quick response PCR test, because the PCR test you send out and it takes at least 24 hours to get a response. The LAMP test allows you to get a response in an hour. And so all of those have been provided by the state, and the state will, they are sunsetting many of those programs, so that the test at home program was sunsetted. The assurance testing, which was for staff, has been sunsetted, but they will continue to supply tests to the health offices to test for symptomatic students. Yeah.
Any other questions for the superintendent? Mr. Broadley, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. So I did my principal's report, and I'm in the view of public comment and people here. We have HVAC update. We are in the process of looking to get an engineer to finish or complete the final phase of our HVAC work that is needed. We discussed this earlier in buildings and grounds. To select the engineer, and a little bit later in the agenda that will follow. Our superintendent, I know, has written up specs, and it's a long-winded state approval process. The first parts are underway, and after selecting an engineer, we can then hopefully get project approval and move through the Essa protocol to hopefully have these services paid for, thus saving taxpayers money to do it and having Essa pay for it. We have bids. We've had the bids for a while now, and the engineers are aware of that. And again, it wasn't a purposeful, or it wasn't done on purpose or anyone's fault. It was just a reconstruction of the board, and tonight was the first time to meet. So I believe, as we'll see in 7B, hopefully we'll have an engineer to pick. Also, just adding on to that, we talked about in buildings and grounds tonight about the possibility of PCBs being tested for. I'm not sure what that acronym stands for. David, can you help me out here?
Polychlorinated biphenyls. I think it's too bad that Cole Street or left.
Thanks. And that is going to be added to the conversation of getting that tested, getting it tested to see that we hopefully don't have PCVs. However, the plan is to move ahead because of the time constraints around getting the job done, getting an engineer, getting bids out, getting materials, etc. We wanted to move forward with the engineer part first. So Hvac update is Hvac is a,
We got that on the committee update.
yeah, we've got that there. Just briefly, we have an advisory committee that we've set up. We had our first meeting on March 17th. I believe we're working in a very fruitful direction to really discuss the best way to use our donation with many different inputs, and then make a recommendation to the board for the different ways that we may want to spend the money to benefit our students. I put in the, there's actually 7 sort of criteria that we have to follow in accounting purposes that was brought to us by Kathleen Breyer. I've started working on that. It's not done yet, but hopefully by the end of our next meeting on April 28th, we will have all the people that should be taking care of all the correct business to manage the monies. An update on the electrical generators. We've had a project going for a while now. Our generators have not been used basically because of our electrical wiring, and feel free, Mr. Burt, to add in here in case I get anything wrong. Our circuitry was in need of update. We did apply through Essa for that, Essa 2, I believe it was, and Andy, correct me if I'm wrong there, to get the funds to do it. We've gone through all the process. We're about that far away, which is a small far away, to beginning the project. What that will do is that will get our generators back up and working. We'll have demand response generators, and we'll also be able to use them as prime response. We're also working together with the state to make sure that we complete all the required and adequate paperwork, so we do everything in the right manner through the federal regulations compliance.
For the new board members,
Again, that was a project, that was a one.
yeah,
Yes.
so there's been a switch that lo and behold has been out for quite some time. And when John got on board and started looking at things, he raised his hand and said, this should be fixed. So that's why it hasn't been fixed, but it seems to take a long time at this point right now to get projects like that done, but that's why that's kind of got done first, because it's one of those things, if the power goes off, we've got nothing here. And we can send kids home, but we also, this is a hub for if something ever drastically happened in our area, this is where people come. So we had to make sure we had that fixed.
And our generators are in very good working order. I know they're measured by their hours of usage, but ours are in very good shape. Our one major generator can run the whole building. We have a smaller backup one that can contribute to most of the building running too. What else was I going to say in that? Also, with the demand response, once we set that up again, that we will then be able to, by complying with Green Mountain Power, it's a very short time per month. I believe that the last time we spoke to the rep, it was like a Friday night for 4 hours. That's just an example of when it was done before, and that can save us $2,000 to $3,000 a month just by doing that each month. So hopefully we'll have future savings on our electric bills too. So
The optional mask update, just wanted to keep everybody informed. March 14th, when the governor and the state and the AOE guidelines were allowing masks as optional, we had approximately 80 students and staff not wearing masks. And for me, in all my time in the building, that has been one of the smoothest transitions that I've ever seen. It was, we had our normal Monday morning meeting early, and I guess I was just waiting and listening in the background for kids to say, "Oh, wait a minute, we don't have to wear them," or none of that. It was so quiet. And talking, Jason, I know with you commented that your kids were up and Adam and ready to go, and actually looking forward to going to school early. So, which was good to hear. So, spring sports began last Monday. We got approximately 100 students out involved in some activity. Sports that we have this spring right now are girls tennis, boys and girls track, baseball and softball. We have reasonable numbers in baseball and softball that will also have JV teams out there too. And our SBAC testing, math and ELA for 9th graders, and our 11th grade science test, the Smarter Balance Assessment put out by the state, which we've been doing now for approximately 4 years, will be administered to 9th graders on the 426 and 428. And the 11th grade students will take their science assessment. I believe we targeted the first day to do that, the 426. So that's all I have for now.
Thank you.
Question,
Yes.
Madam Chair. I forgot to ask to add this to the agenda, but I received an email from the basketball coach. In years past, before Mr. Broadley took over, the high school gym was on lockdown when it wasn't basketball season, basically. And so I'm gonna try to get it on the next month's agenda that we can approve that to have the gym used in off season for basketball drills and stuff like that, and during the summer and all that kind of stuff. And it is in our purview on the school board. It's we can rule on that. That is page 5 of the whatever the Bible here. So I just wanted to ask, if you would be willing to hopefully do that, even if we didn't have to like overrule you, so to speak.
No, I think we're back to, for me, we're back to normal. That's my outlook on it. As I say, we have about 10% of kids still wearing masks, which is fine. There's no, it's been so smooth. It's hard to explain it. I guess I expected, maybe I was wrong, that there was going to be this, oh, I'm still wearing that, but none of that. So for me, though, we're back to normal. We're in meetings without masks. We're walking through the day. I talked with Grace earlier. She was wearing a mask all the time. I talked with a few other students. They weren't wearing masks. Totally natural conversations.
So I think it was way before the mask, John, but even when my daughter's in basketball, you weren't allowed to use the high school gym during the summer, so, the first thing I'd asked for was some Sundays, and I was told we don't open school on Sundays, but we weren't allowed to use it during the summer.
Right.
We're on vacations.
Or anytime. And
so
it's a great source of revenue. It could be a great source of revenue.
I think for me, it's, we have the facility use forms that we let many people, and we've had this year already, we've had AAU basketball in.
And I'm not even talking, I'm just saying, I've talked to a lot of coaches, and every coach I talk to always says the same common thing, that athletics is a classroom. You know what I mean? It is a classroom. It's not extracurricular. You learn a lot with athletics. So the more we can keep kids doing that, the better. Everyone learns differently. You know what I mean? I'm a more hands-on guy than a book guy. So everyone learns differently. That's all I had to say
Well,
about
I'm all for it, unless the board tell me
And then I had one other question, if I could, Molly, on the electrical generators.
Yes.
Can you explain to me more on the demand? Are you saying that the electricity can't keep up with the current demand on the grid, and what are we gonna fuel these electric generators with?
They're with oil, right?
They're run
Yeah, run on oil.
Diesel?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're electric
use-
can't keep up, so
gonna
we're
use
gonna,
one.
we're gonna pour diesel in it. Okay.
It's not something, again, we haven't done it for 3 years.
I just think it goes to show that everyone that's pushing more green stuff, electric, at the end of the day, when it's super cold out or things don't work, we go back to common sense things that do work. So that's all. Thank you.
I believe that it's in response thing is Green Mountain Power taking us off of the grid for 4 hours a month.
Short period of time.
Yeah, it's not to,
And the
Wouldn't you
return.
want to test it monthly anyways? Isn't that a good practice?
Oh, yeah.
to
No,
test
that-
it?
And that's totally, I mean, that's allowed. I mean,
Yeah.
we would do that.
You wanna
It's
make
just
sure that
the,
it work when
the
you
one
need it.
night a month where they want us to come off, they will give us a rate, they'll lower our rates to give us a huge saving. And then, of course, if we have a natural disaster, we're all equipped, ready to go. It should kick in within 7 seconds of us losing power and it kicking in. So,
thank you.
I just have a question, being a newbie.
Mhm.
What is the Haver update? Is that a one donation or anyone that chooses to donate?
no, we got a Maureen Haver, and the Haver Foundation she's a very wealthy lady who loves Bellows Falls, basically I could give you, and maybe another time I can give you the sort of 2-hour script on it. But she loves Bellows Falls. She wants to give us money. She donated $250,000 for us to work towards four areas. One was financial literacy. One was any online learning that leads to graduation, I believe. Another one is the development of science, and the other one is the development of economics. So again, our committee in June, if you'd like to come to that, I'll send you an invite too, because we finally set up a committee and met on the 17th of March. And it was a lot of different people, a lot of different stakeholders that were giving input, and we're talking about it. And I just think it's moving in a great direction. So.
Great, thank you.
Anything else for the principal? All right, let's move to building and grounds. Building and Grounds Committee met before the school board meeting tonight. I put on their parking lot because I want to see some of the parking lot. We didn't talk about the parking lot tonight because our priorities really are to work on this HVAC system right now. And we've beat that around so many times that we didn't even talk about the parking lot, but I'm not gonna give up on the parking lot. It's gonna come back because I just, I turn my radio up so loud, I'm not supposed to hear things going on in my car, but I'm pretty sure if I didn't slow down tonight, I was gonna have some problems.
Molly, can I ask that maybe we make a motion to at least get an estimate for the parking lot to either cut and fix or replace all, or do we use the old estimate that was passed but didn't pass a couple years ago?
Yeah, that old estimate's never gonna fly now.
Right. Can we make a motion at least to start, get an estimate?
I don't think it would hurt. It's not gonna cost anything to get an
So we
estimate.
have the people that we paid a fair amount of money who developed it the first time are actually working on giving us a new figure. So
There you
when
go.
I get that, I'll give it to you. And
thank you.
And again, I look back to what was mentioned before of us paying people to do things already and then going back to ask, we've had a pandemic. We couldn't really do a lot anyway. What's the new cost going to be? And that's basically where we're at. So when I find that out, I will report out on it. So
thank you.
So that would include taking care of the quote unquote Hodgson Pond out here?
Yeah, all the drainage. If we're gonna do the
All the
parking
drain-
lot,
yeah.
I'm gonna stick to my guns and stamp my feet and holler as loud as everybody else can, because we gotta take care of the drainage first. It's not gonna do us any good to
Right.
fix a pothole. I mean, it might, they're pretty deep right now. But
I've picked up
you
kids
can
and
squirrel
seen-
around if you're really good.
seen staff
And-
members up to their knees almost in this little Hodgson
You've gone
Pond
this guy
here.
because we've researched into that as well.
Yes, Sean.
So I know that you're talking about the driveway project that you're calling the parking lot, right?
Yeah, yeah,
You're talking about
yeah.
the whole-
Yeah, the whole thing,
But as far-
from Route 5 out to the buses.
Right, but as far as the things that we fix year to year, that is something that we already have in the works. The potholes right out here are bigger than normal. There's a couple over there, they get fixed in the fall. Right now, we're just waiting for the plant to open so we can get asphalt. I made a call today and they're gonna open probably the second week of April. And I've already got people to come in and do the work. That will be probably fixed over April vacation.
I had no worries that you weren't gonna fix all the man-eating potholes, but I
Well, I
want
know
it
how
fixed
big they
so
are.
it doesn't happen every single year.
Yes.
Jason,
Sorry to ask, is there a way, and I just want to think like forward thinking, like 60 years from now, whatever. If the layout here changes and if we can use ESSER money, maybe Andy can help with, if we make another way out of this place instead of one way in, one way out, would ESSER help pay for some of that? If we, I don't know the specific landscaping around here, but if there's an emergency route for fire trucks or something, would that counter as ESSER, or how would that work?
It has to have a COVID related.
So no.
I will say, and back in October, I queried the state on the parking lot thing. And they looked at me like, are you nuts? Like, they said they could not justify, as much as they want to give money for infrastructure and stuff like that, they couldn't justify like that piece. Now, if there were some reason that we needed to, let's say we built some other building on this property and there was a reason to have another egress kind of thing and all that stuff, then that would fall into that whole scope of work.
Right, because,
So-
just 60 years from now, if the population keeps dwindling the way it is, we built this school for 750 students, we're down to 302. 302. At some point, all the schools could be one place. And then we need ways to get in and out. So I'm just trying to think, like, when I'm dead, 50 years from now.
Margot had her hand up.
Margot,
My apologies for not being able to make the Buildings and Grounds Committee meeting today. I didn't have it on my calendar until accidentally I scheduled something else in that same slot. At the meeting, did you all decide on a next meeting date?
Before the next board meeting. is
before
what
the
you
next
said.
board meeting, and the next board meeting is April 11th.
April 11th? Okay, I'll put that on my calendar now. Thanks.
Okay, so we met, we didn't really talk about anything to do with the parking lot or the driveway, but it's always gonna be on my agenda because that's my hot spot. If anybody accuses me of having something I'm on the board for, that's what. We talked a lot about the HVAC system and how we would like to proceed. And as a Building and Grounds Committee, we agreed that we were going to, excuse me, there's a lot of papers written here tonight. So we had a report from ME and a report from Glenn Thomas. And the committee has agreed that they would like to ask the board to accept ME's bid specs for the engineering of the HVAC system, which was $160,000. Can somebody
I have
give
a
me a,
question.
Let me get a motion on the floor. I'll
Thank
move
you.
that. Molly.
thank you.
Then I have a
There is a motion on the floor to accept ME's bid specs for the engineering HVAC system for $160,000. Now we're open for discussion. Priscilla.
Does that include air conditioning?
So it is, the engineering does include air conditioning.
It
Air
does.
conditioning design. Yeah.
Okay.
The engineers are designing it all, and the AC was included as part of the designing piece, or can be. And then they will design the job and put it up to bid. So we're getting the engineer
Okay. So the 160,000 is just for them to do the specs.
to come
It's
in,
not
do the
to do the
specs and
work.
be
That's
clerk,
correct.
and be clerk of the works. So
Any other
It's like a
questions?
$2 million project.
Yeah. It's
I mean, I just,
I was gonna
yeah.
say, yeah.
Is there any other questions about that? Appears to be none. Let's do a roll call for the motion we have on the table to accept the ME bid specs for engineering of the HVAC system for $160,000. Margot,
Yes.
Deb,
No.
Pam,
Yes.
June,
Yes.
Jason,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Brenda,
Yes,
Priscilla.
I don't know enough about it. I'm gonna abstain.
Motion passes. Thank you. We've had a lot of meetings about that. It feels good to get it started in the right direction here. Next item on the agenda is Essa. So I put that on there because I think it's very important that we're having all these meetings, all these little groups, but there's no updates that are brought to the board. And so putting you on the spot, Priscilla, but you're on the Essa committee, and I don't want a 2 hour, but I want a 5 minute. This is what we did at the last Essa, and I want to be able to do that every time because it's important. It's a lot of money. And what are we doing with it?
Basically, we're looking at different projects that we possibly need to do throughout the supervisory union at all of the schools. We prioritize some of the things. We're working on doing priorities for them. We also are looking at doing a evaluation by a company to look at all of the buildings so that we can determine exactly what really does need for capital projects and what needs to be there. And then we can ascertain whether it can come under ESSER funds or whether it has to be a local cost. For example, the parking lot. That's when it comes to mind. Whereas you're looking at maybe security doors that definitely could be added to COVID costs, because those are protection for your students as far as, being able to know who's coming in a building and who's not, those different things.
Have we been awarded any extra money that we had spent?
We are currently in the process of spending on and earmarking all of the level 1 funds. The level 2 funds we've looked at, and then the level 3 is infrastructure. There are different requirements for each one of the 3 levels. They have to be expended, the first level funds have to be expended by the end of June and the end of September, right? Is that
September.
they're earmarked though by June,
yeah.
it's
So
done by September this year.
my interest
next
is, what are we
one
doing
is-
for the high school?
The next one is, okay. The next
Sorry,
year
that's
is
what I'm-
the following year, and then the 3rd level is the other year. Andy, can you help me
Yeah,
out with exactly
so,
what's for the high school?
I'd have to pull it up, and I did a presentation at the SU board back during winter break. Actually, quite a large percentage of ESSER 1 funds were actually used for the high school as opposed to other places. There was a track timing device at $15,000 that was purchased for the high school. And then out of ESSER 2, because we are spending out of ESSER 2 and beginning to start to spend out of ESSER 3. Out of ESSER 2, almost $70,000 was put forth for the circuit breaker project. that we
For the
talked about.
generator?
Yeah, for the generator, for that to be repaired. There's also been quite a bit of things with cafeteria tables and a lot of the upgrades in the cafeteria and in the kitchen were used, ESSER funds were used.
The new freezer outside there, is that?
I believe that was, and then things like cleaning supplies. So a lot of ESSER 1 was about mitigating COVID. ESSER 2 falls into recovery, and so and preparing, and so then ESSER 3 falls into that too. So ESSER 3 is more about preparing for a new surge of COVID. So if you want to think about it that way, so it's mitigating, recovery, preparing. And so one of the things we've also heavily invested in is with our students and our staff's mental well-being, and looking at providing a lot of things through homeschool liaisons and restorative practices, and building up that capacity for our students. And so that the high school is part of that. So it's more SU wide, but that falls into where that is. And then I think that there was a misconception at some point prior to me coming on that this $20 million out of the 3 grants that, you know, the high school has 300 students, which is about 30% of our population. So therefore they get 30% of that. That's not how the grants are
No, I
designed.
thought you told me it was 50.
Every principal says the same thing, Molly. Every principal says the same. So I think there was that misconception that everyone got a you know, that divvied piece
Has
of
to be
pie.
approved and-
And really it's about when we're looking at it and talking to people, where are we going to get the best investment for our community in working on it? And so that's where the committee has spent a lot of time. And then we have, we're going to be having a public forum at the end of April. We're going to be presenting a lot of how we're looking at spending the ESSER 3 funds, which is about $13 million. And we have to set aside about $3 million minimum to address loss of learning. And then the rest of it can be earmarked for other things. And then we also are we've partnered with a company called Thought Exchange that's going to allow us to do not online surveys, but actually like have online focus groups and public comment and stuff like that. So we can push out a question and get public feedback pretty quick and get those analytics. So we're really trying to work on a lot of that. Looking at also some things, a lot of these types of devices, these Promethean boards, we are heavily investing in putting in a lot of classrooms here, purchasing of the owls so that we can go into a classroom. If a student is out sick, a teacher can bring an owl into a classroom and be able to, that student can join the class. You know, and high school students more than anything should be able to do that. I mean, you know, we've got kids down at our elementary that are doing it, so I know high school kids can do it. So that's where we're looking at it, but we can, you know, we're as Priscilla was saying, I'll finish this up. Because ESSER 1 ends in September, we're trying to make sure we've spent all of those funds first. And then ESSER 2 is over in September of 23. So that'll be our next, and then ESSER 4 is September of 24.
Yep. Good.
So do you have a worksheet of what the ESSER 1's money is being spent on?
Yep. Yeah.
I would like to see that.
Because we have, there has to be approval by the state. The request goes to the state with that, and then they approve it, and then we spend it. It's an estimate of what as close as we can get of what would be spent for that particular item. When we actually spend that amount, then if there's some left over, we can use that for something else. So we're trying to make sure that all of these things are done as quickly as possible right now, so that we don't lose any of those funds at
Right.
all.
I'm just curious as to what the amounts are, and what we're spending it on.
Yeah, I mean, we can provide, I mean, I think that you might see something like we were just talking about with the HVAC system. We put in a request for the whole construction at $2 million. We have no idea what that's gonna cost, right?
Right.
So unfortunately, you tie up funds and then you have to go back and clean up to try and.
Yep,
get funds
I
out.
get that.
So,
I do remember now that you said that, you had a pie shape that showed, and it did look like the high school, that definitely the 30%, so.
I'll try and push it.
We got a lot. We got a lot. Well, we asked for a lot.
Okay, that's good.
Deb has her hand.
Hi, Deb.
Hi, my only question was, I understood the process to be submitting ideas for, well, purposes for usage to get approved by the state, but we've already spent ESSER 1. How do those two things jibe? You spent it without approval. Is that what the case was in ESSER 1?
So there's rules and regulations around the 3 different grants. And so ESSER 1 did not have with all grants, you need to get approval from the state. So you come up with a concept, a strategy. You write the strategy, you submit it to the state, and the state will decide if they like the strategy or not. Does it meet it? Does it not meet it? They might tell you need to wordsmith it a little better. But typically they've given you a lot of understanding ahead of time what, like, don't submit something about, like, I can't think of, like, what might be approved and what might not be approved. And so with ESSER 1 and ESSER 2, you were able to submit things and get it approved, and then you can go back and amend your grant constantly because your needs change because they're multi-year grants. With ESSER 3 funds, and then they pushed it down to ESSER 2. If you're doing construction or you're purchasing an item that's over $5,000, you have to get pre-approval before you can even put it into your grant. So when we purchased the food van for our food services to be able to transport food around, we had to get pre-approval because that was about a $40,000 van before we could even ask for it, if that makes sense.
Yes, that makes sense. Thank you.
Paul Bannock, I'll identify myself as chairman of the Essa Committee in Westminster, so I have some best to qualify the next question. I don't want this question to be seen in any way as a disapproval, but when we talked earlier about an entrance change or parking lot improvements, someone said, well, that doesn't qualify for COVID relief. Maybe that's really under a whole different set of guidelines than we are, very possible. How did a timing board for the track qualify for COVID relief?
I have tried to ask myself that question. It was prior to my tenure. So I was not involved in that being approved. That was the previous administration. I think that some of the wording around it had to do with needing because when kids come in, they get close together, so the timing allows them to stay spread out or something of that nature around COVID. I honestly, I can't, yeah, I understand that. My understanding is there are some differences between the municipal arts and the educational arts. So.
That's my second question, if I may, final. It sounds to me from this discussion that the money's not been given to you. You have to apply for each amount.
So you're reimbursed.
Okay.
So essentially, the SU is funding it up front, and then we're reimbursed for the costs. So we apply for, so one of the things I learned coming on was that we hadn't applied for any reimbursement this year. And so one of the things we worked very diligently to do was to apply for our Essa reimbursement, so that our bank accounts didn't go low. That, you know, so we were able to get that.
So, but we're not like doing all this stuff until you know we have the money though, have the money coming, right?
Right, you get approved, so you know you're gonna
You
get
know you're
reimbursed.
getting it, so then
That
you
was
can
my
start.
point, I think
Okay.
even back earlier in building and grounds, where I don't like, you can go ahead and start a project, but if it hasn't been approved, it may not get approved. And so then you're on the hook for that, for those costs, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah, great question.
Okay, any other questions on Essa? That was really just, I just kind of want to get us all up to speed, that's all. WNESU update, again, another thing that I'd just like to see on the agenda every time. And Brenda has told us that she will give us an update on the WNSU meeting.
My first report, be nice. Okay. Superintendent called the meeting to order. The board was reorganized. Committee assignments will be handled by email preference to the chairperson, which was Jack Blair. David Clark provided public comment citing the quorum necessary for 9-member board versus 12-member board. And tabled the review and approval of previous meetings boards minutes. Superintendent cited new COVID protocols will be implemented this week. Gave us the name of the new business manager, James Lazina, who will start May 1st. WNSU is in the process of finalizing the summer programming. He also talked about the committee meeting next week to interview innovative and instruction candidates. And I think this is correct. I think MOA will be handled in the next scheduled meeting, as well as the teacher roster approval. And it was requested by a board member that there would be regular ESSER fund updates provided.
Thank you. So the SU meeting is recorded and everything, but it's just nice to get a little update if anybody had any questions. Anybody have any questions for Brenda? You're letting her off easy tonight. All right, we're down to unfinished business. And the first one is the Hvac Committee update. John, do you want to speak to that?
Well, again, in my report, we just talked about, we developed a committee that had many different stakeholders. We had our first meeting, explained what how much the funds were and what they were for. We had a lot of good ideas and a lot of good suggestions. We talked about the need for me to develop the accounting system and the people or places responsible, which again, that's my goal, is to take that back to our next meeting and have that as finalized as we can. And to also look at projects that we might want to undertake for using the funds. And then when I then report back to the representatives of Hvac, then hopefully from the suggestion of the committee and then getting approval from the board to whatever expenditures we do, we maintain our relationship, we show them what we're spending, and maybe they'll give us some more money too. So that's it in a nutshell.
So John really simplified that, but what I learned, that was not an opportune time of day for me to be here, but I showed up, and what I learned was that if we can get our ducks in a row and get a plan, right, and make sure we're doing our paperwork correctly, this family is very supportive of the high school, and good chance that probably they would support us in some other things to try to help in places that were, I'm going to use the word weak, I don't know if that's the right word, so beside the principal, but places where we need to do a little better job.
It's needed to support.
And so it is, and we had teachers there, we had Mike Stack there. What's Mike Stack starting? What's his?
He's Ellis Falls building it. That's it, Ellis Falls Trades.
Yeah.
Thank you.
He's a gentleman that has retired and moved back to the area and is really getting involved in the high school. I mean, basically threw himself at anybody that wanted his help in any kind of any kind of part of the financial world. So that was really nice to see. David and I were there for board members, there were teachers there. And it was, I was glad I went. I learned something at the Hvac Committee that so it didn't really have much to do with what we were there for, but a science teacher spoke that her labs are just in disarray terribly, and I didn't even know that, so. You know, it takes, I guess, meetings outside of the box to learn some of this stuff. And what we do to, you know, to better something, you know, we do a lot of stuff, but sometimes we miss stuff that's probably really important to some kids, so. I was glad that I went to that. David, would you like to add anything?
I think you pretty much touched all the bases, Molly.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, I think we've already done this. We had this on here twice. Select engineer for HVAC is 7B, and we did that in building and grounds. Now, the next thing on the agenda is the MOU, and I would like Priscilla to please speak to that.
Well, first, I move that we approve the MOU covering retention and hiring bonuses and authorize the chair to sign. And I will speak to it. This is coming out of the Essa Committee. It was a recommendation from the state originally that retention and hiring bonuses could be used under the Essa funds, and they recommended this. So when the committee discussed this, we talked about it for starting back in December. And then in January, we were starting to finalize it. Andy put in a request to the state to cover what we were recommending so that we could move ahead with it. Then, although this is ESSER funds and actually under the perusal of the superintendent, our lawyer wanted us to recommended to Andy that he do an MOU, so he proposed that so that it could be equal to all of the people in our district. This includes everyone, bus drivers and teachers and staff members and kitchen help and office help and everybody. Andy is insisting that he will turn it down and not take his part of this, although he certainly should be eligible for it. So it goes for everybody. Cheryl is on that committee. I don't know if you want to give her, if she wants to add anything, if I've left something out.
There, go ahead, June.
I just have a quick, what is MOU? What is that stand?
Memorandum of Understanding.
Okay, thank you.
It's also known, we called it a side letter of agreement also, so that.
Well, that's why I was wondering, because it doesn't say MAU.
And MAU also is used too, so.
June, you're the newest one here. Do you have any questions about it before we proceed?
No, I don't think so. I just emailed a few people and the superintendent, and I just wanted the wording to state that you were past employees and had already signed on a contract to be next year, employed by next year. And that's been done, so.
Because the MOU and the plan are two different things,
Okay.
right? So the MOU was the agency of education says, you got to have a plan. The MOU says we're going to give this stipend and kind of outlines what the dollar amount. And so that's what the boards are agreeing to. The plan was being developed at the same time of exactly how we would disperse those funds. So when you made that suggestion, I thought it was very appropriate to add that in just to kind of make sure we're not
We could
putting
be,
out funds and something.
yeah, paying somebody to leave and then paying for their replacement.
Right.
Well, I would like to offer an amendment. And my amendment is that the MOU be amended to grant members of the support staff a $2,500 bonus. And I would like to speak to my amendment. And the reason that I'm suggesting that support staff receive $2,500 instead of $1,000 is that I believe that in terms of real money, of course, $1,000 is a lot more to a para than it is to a teacher. But I think that we need to reward paras in a fashion that will not only recognize their services, but also encourage hiring. And I want to go just a little bit further down this road. There was an almighty push on to run this one through without discussion in the public arena of why we felt these bonuses were important. And of course, I feel that was a mistake, but there are a couple of concerns for me. One is I don't know if it's ESSER 1, ESSER 2, or ESSER 3 money. Then we get into a parity issue, I believe, which is that I don't believe that all school districts in Vermont have been awarded the ESSER large S to the extent that Wyndham Northeast Supervisory Union has. And bluntly, I have concerns that what happens when we offer bonuses is that we are sending a message that we're out for business. We're looking to attract staff. We want to keep the staff we have. Now, that's great, certainly for Wyndham Northeast, but what happens if you're a school district which is not as lavishly well endowed with ESSER funds? Are your people going to migrate up here for a recruitment bonus? Well, I think that could happen. And bluntly, I think if we're going to use ESSA money, and I know that the prevailing attitude is somebody else's money, not ours. Well, it's not correct. It's taxpayer money. And to a greater or lesser degree, it's coming out of our pockets, even if we don't recognize that direct relationship. So I made the amendment because I believe that if we're going to go out and spend money and encourage recruitment to Wyndham Northeast, that I think that our greatest need is paraprofessionals, and let's make it worth their while.
Andy, go.
I just want to clarify. So you're suggesting $2,500 for support staff, so paraprofessionals.
Okay, well, support staff, I believe, also includes custodians, anyone who's on that support staff contract.
Okay. So I'm trying to do the math in my head real fast here, but as far as like food service workers, they're not part of that support staff contract. Bus drivers are not part of that contract. Some secretaries are not a part of that contract. So I just want to make sure, like, as I try to add up the intention, and it is the intention to amend it to $2,500 as a retention bonus and $2,500 as a sign-on bonus?
A total of $2,500, and I certainly would not have an objection if someone wanted to amend my amendment to cover non-union employees such as secretaries, food service, bus drivers.
Okay, thank you.
I don't hear an amendment to the amendment coming, Andy, so I think that part is largely a moot point.
So, just so I understand, David, so we don't get, right now you have amended the motion to pay support staff $2,500 total. And I'm sorry for my ignorance, but I'm not sure what support staff is. Because when I listen to you and when I listen to you, I think that it's support staff is only paraprofessionals, or is it?
Well, from what David just said to me, and if I can, and David, please, that's why I was asking. Originally, he said anyone that is covered under the support staff contract, but he would be
happy to accept an amendment to include anyone who also would be a non-teacher outside of the contract. Is that correct, David?
Is that, that's correct. My amendment was specific to the support staff. And as I said, I would not argue against an amendment that enlarged that pool to non-union employees.
You can't discuss.
I can make an amendment to his amendment. Can I
No,
still?
you can't discuss. even.
Priscilla, please.
Okay.
Can I?
So the reasoning is because, but we're talking about the high school. And the person that you are closely related to works at the central school, correct?
Yeah, I'm not even, my question is it about the high school or all the schools?
This is just the high school, right?
Okay. And Priscilla, I
Yes.
would abstain, so don't worry about that, okay, Priscilla?
Yeah.
Thank you. I know my role.
Thank you. Go ahead.
That was my question.
Oh, okay. I thought you wanted to.
No, I
amend
do
the
have a
motion.
question. So is the kitchen staff part of,
Not part of his.
then I'd like to amend his amendment to also include everybody,
Okay.
everybody,
Everybody that isn't under the teacher's contract,
correct.
union contract. Is that the right wording? Union contract?
Correct.
They walk in this building, they get paid, everybody.
Okay.
Is anybody else?
So right now there is, hold on, Margot. Right now there is an amendment to David's amendment to give a $2,500 bonus broken up into 2 payments for all staff that isn't included in the teachers' union. Did I get that correct?
I think you'd have to ask Jason if he intended to include teachers in his amendment. That's the way I heard it. but
You want everybody to
make
get
it.
$2,500?
No, I want the teachers to get 1,000 and paraprofessionals,
Okay.
kitchen staff, custodians,
Bus drivers.
bus drivers.
That's only at the high school?
Well, we're only voting on the high school.
So may I ask for some clarification here? Because some of the staff that are being spoken of don't work for the high school, they work for the SU, especially the paraprofessionals. And the kitchen staff do not primarily only work for the kitchen here, but they work in other kitchens, and they work for the SU. The bus drivers work for the SU, they don't work for the high school. So if the high school, if you are focusing primarily on high school people, there's about, how many paraprofessionals do you have? 2 that we're talking about. So I mean, and it, because we have people who don't just, and that was the whole purpose of bringing this forward. And because our contract is not broken up by districts, we don't have separate contracts for each district. We have one for all of our employees. And so if we're talking about just the high school, then we would have to parse out, like, again, the driver works for the SU, so I would,
I'd like to withdraw my amendment.
I mean, that's just my concern as we get into this, so.
So, with David's amendment, and Jason has withdrawn his amendment, with David's amendment, you have 2 paraprofessionals that work here for the high school. And that's the only support staff you have.
Custodians.
Custodians as well, correct?
Okay.
Yes.
And how many of those?
5.
5.
Custodians.
Anyone else we're missing?
And
2.
custodians, that's grounds and
Yeah.
building
Yeah, yeah.
cleaning.
Plus 5 plus, would you include Sean and that, director? That'd be CB6. So I'd like to include them.
Yes.
And if I could just caution the board that my concern is the state approved a certain dollar amount. When they look at how much money you're setting aside for certain things. If this board moves to do that, does that mean that every other board is going to go tit for tat And there is only a certain amount of money right now that is allocated towards this strategy, which I do not believe, that's why I was asking David for some clarification, that we would have enough money in that strategy to follow through on this proposal without, I would have to run numbers, so I just don't have that, so.
Molly, may I speak to that, please?
Yes.
I'm of the belief that for 2 years, these people, $1,000 is really a slap in their face. It's $10 a week for the last 2 years. If you're gonna give somebody money, put it in their paycheck. So they, next year when they get an increase, if they warrant one, it's their percentage of increases based off of that dollar amount. This money's already spent for these hardworking people. So honestly, I think it's not enough. If everyone says how wonderful they are and how hard they work, $1,000 is peanuts, and they've already spent it. They've already think that they deserved it, and they did. So, thank you.
How many employees does the district have that would be getting these?
I would have to run I mean, I can guesstimate for you, but there's like, I mean, we have 300 plus employees, maybe 350.
Oh, no, I meant the regular, not the amendment, the regular. Because you said there was a certain dollar
Right,
figure
so
that
the strategy is $400,000 to cover
okay.
Both retention and sign-on bonuses. And again, it sometimes you have to go higher than what it is. The strategy is written for $1,000. So we'd have to go back and amend the strategy. And you know, and as I said, it's just, if the funds are right now being asked for out of ESSER 2 funds. So if we needed to increase that strategy, that means we'd have to take away from another strategy at this time.
So currently, the 400,000 is offering every employee of the WNESU district $1,000.
Correct.
And it's 500 now and 500 next September.
Correct.
Okay. I'm gonna go on the board for Margot.
I think my answers may have been addressed, or my questions may have been addressed by Andy at this point. I was wondering where additional funds would come from if we paid more. And then I also had a concern about which are high school employees and which are district employees. So I think he's addressed both of those.
Okay. Deb?
Yes, my concern is one of process typically, technically, which is that this thing is all turned up on its head, the way the dates and stuff turn up. The members of each individual school board that belongs to the SU should have their vote and bring their representatives to the table of the SU where everyone could make that determination on items just like this. Instead, each board has not had their say, as we're doing now, and the SU has already voted. The members of the SU, some of which are us, have already voted on this item at $1,000 apiece per every employee of the superintendency. That's not what's going on here now, and this is a mess, and I just have to say it that way. It's a mess to change our direction in this stream. Thanks.
Priscilla, and then we're gonna go to vote.
It has already been voted at Rockingham. It's already been voted at Westminster and the Unified District, which includes Grafton, Athens, and Westminster. And from that standpoint, to do the $1,000, if you vote this way, you're determining inequitable funds. I'm not sure that which may be what the reason for bringing this up is, I don't know, but at that point, you have the association saying you're being inequitable and not fair. So to me, this is this is just delaying it, and maybe that's what was meant in making the motion, I don't know. But by doing that, you are running the risk of the people not getting it as well, and maybe that's part of the delay. I would recommend that we vote down the amendment and that we go back to the original motion and vote that, which will be in agreement with all the other districts. If you want to give them more later, then you can do another motion to give them more later. But this is what we're trying to get past at this point, so they at least get $1,000. Otherwise, you're running the risk of them not getting it. Thanks.
There is a motion on the, there is an amendment to a motion on the table to pay teachers $1,000 and support staff for the high school $2,500. And I'm going to roll call. Margot, how do you vote? We're voting on the amendment.
No on the amendment.
Deb,
No.
Pam,
No.
June,
No.
Jason,
Abstain.
David,
Yes.
Brenda,
No.
Priscilla.
No,
The amendment has failed. Now we have a motion on the table to approve the MOU, which gives every staff member up to $1,000 bonus. Half gets paid now, half gets paid when we go back to school. I don't have the exact dates in front of me, but September, October. Did I get that right, Andy?
Yeah, may I just comment on the reason why it's split out? Is that okay?
Sure.
And that was a little bit of pushback from the state. That's one of those things where you put it up there and the state says, well, it's a retention. So therefore, how are you ensuring that people are coming back kind of thing? And so that was the reason why to split, because I think the committee, when we originally proposed it, did not propose it that way, but it had to get amended for that purpose, so.
Okay. All right, let's vote on the motion. Margot,
Yes.
Deb,
I'd like to abstain. Thank you.
Pam,
Yes.
June,
Yes.
Jason,
Abstain.
David,
I am also abstaining.
Brenda,
Yes.
Priscilla,
yes.
3, 4, 5 yes and 3 abstentions. Motion passes. I have unfinished business. 7D, negotiations. Not sure what this question of conflict.
That was, I asked for that. Our new board member is was an ex-teacher, or I don't know how to word that, but she.
Former teacher.
Former teacher. I just want to make sure there's going to be no conflict with, she's head of negotiations and she works at Green Mountain. Will that be a conflict? I'm asking.
I would like to say I am actually not a negotiator for the board. I am not a union negotiator and I am not a board negotiator. I mean, like, I'm not the head. But me being a teacher should not be of any conflict of interest because I worked in a different district with a different contract.
So Pam, we might have got something wrong, but I thought we had you, when we did renegotiations. Hold on, I'm going back to my book, this way I write everything down.
Number C on the minutes, it says teacher and support staff negotiations. Priscilla, Deb, and Ken.
Yeah.
Priscilla and Deb are not.
Okay, hold on,
Oh,
I got the floor. Pam, maybe we voted you in for something that you didn't want or wasn't really Edison, but we have you on negotiations.
No, I
And
wanted
now
to
I
be
got-
on negotiations. I don't want to be the head of negotiations, but I'm willing to serve on negotiations because I understand the board, the perspective as a board member and as an educator. So I can be, someone who understands both sides. If anything, I feel like that makes us a stronger board.
So you do not work for our district, you work for Green Mountain.
Right. I have been working for Green Mountain Union High School for this is my 5th year there. I served a 1-year contract at Central Elementary before that. Just because I am a past employee does not reflect on how I will decide.
Okay, David, can you help me?
Well, I'm going to try to explain what the conflict is here. And the conflict is this. You're going to actually hear a kind of surprising rejoinder here. Conflict is this. When you are a teacher in an adjacent district and you sit on a negotiations committee in your home district, the settlement that district in your home district receives will almost certainly be used as a comparable when you negotiate in your district. That is the conflict of interest. Now, hold on a moment here, Pam. Now,
Pamela, please. I'm
that-
actually Pamela. Every time someone says Pam, you're actually calling me the improper name. I go by Pamela.
Duly noted, Pamela. I've got it. I'll try not to make that mistake again. And you did actually bring that up to me about 3 years ago at the SU board, and I apologize to you for not remembering it. Now, let me get back on track here. And what I want to say is this. At this time, because this district appears to be on the verge of settling a 3-year contract on their teachers with support staff coming next, I am entirely happy to see you on negotiations because I think that your inclination will be to settle generously on the support staff, and I bluntly think that's appropriate.
Yes, actually, I have been a support when I was in Georgia, where I started my education career. I was a para. I know what it's like being a para, and I understand. So the paras will definitely have support from me, but any employee that is under the education umbrella will have my support because I know what it's like every day working in education.
Molly,
Jason,
isn't that?
But I am
Covers the
also
conflict.
very fiscally conservative.
And Molly, I would like to also say that we need to remain consistent. If our previous board member was married to somebody who works in this building, could not vote. I am married to a paraprofessional, and I tend to lean the business side of it. And believe me, I catch hell at home for it. So if anything, I am more consistent as a business person. I think we need to be consistent.
June,
Mr. Haas, should we just consult council on whether
I
or
can
not
definitely
there's
do
a
that if the board would like you to do that.
conflict? That's what I would recommend, to see if there is in fact a conflict, or if Pamela can continue to
Well,
be our.
I'm a union member for TRSU, but I don't do any negotiations. That's other teachers. I'm not on I'm not president, I'm not a negotiator. That's handled by other people. I would not use this to negotiate for my union because I don't do that.
so we're gonna check with council and let you know what they tell us we should be doing.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, now we're at new business for discussion and action. Ratification of teacher contracts. And Cheryl has so nicely came and stayed all night to help me with that line. Thank you. Come on up. You've stuck with it for a couple hours. Might as well give you a chair.
Thank you, thank you. So you have the tentative settlement on your agenda tonight, the tentative settlement with the teachers union. Andy sent that out to you as well as the complete collective bargaining agreement. So I'm just happy to bring you up to date on that, to answer any questions that I can. Pleased to do so. And for a little background, for those who don't know me as well, as I thought about this, I first was elected to the school board in 2016, and that year was appointed to the negotiations committee for paraprofessionals. So that was the beginning of my negotiations experience here. I've been on the negotiations committee now under 3 superintendents, under Chris Kibbe, under Chris Pratt, and now with Andy. I didn't join the teachers negotiation committee representing the boards until January of 2020. So it's just a little more than 2 years at this point in time. So when we think about the paraprofessionals, this conversation we've just been having, they haven't had the opportunity for negotiations to occur for quite a long time because they have been waiting for an agreement with the teachers. And if we back up for just a minute, we now have a 3-year proposal that has been approved by the other school boards in our district and by the union. It's been brought to you tonight for your deliberation and your consideration. This agreement that's been tentatively agreed to, forgive my redundancy there, the salient parts about it, what finally came through would begin July 1 of 2021. That's when it goes into effect. And it does provide a commitment to a 2.5% increase for every salary in the 3 years, plus what's called a step, which is allowing a person to the next calendar year move ahead, demonstrating their successful finishing another year of service. So they get the benefit of another year of service as well as this salary increase. Those are the basics of it. You can ask any questions. Priscilla's been on this negotiations committee to the successful conclusion of at least this phase of it. For those who don't know also, I went through all my files today and I looked at the fact that there was a whole period of time from June of 2020 until June of 2021, where we were really in hiatus. There was no negotiation going on at all. We were essentially in front of the legal system with a disagreement between the union and the boards. So it's taken literally, I remember January 16 of 2020 was the first of the negotiations committee meetings that I went to start this process. So again, a little more than 2 years to get where we are right now. With that.
Thank you, Cheryl. David?
Well, first off, I have to say I'm a believer in collective bargaining. And I believe under collective bargaining, you give something and you get something. My question is, what did the boards get?
Well, the first thing the boards get is the fact that the teachers came in asking for 3.5% for each of 3 years, plus a step. So
That's a good question. And maybe I'm rude here interrupting, but what they were asking for was our money. And with all due respect, when I walk into your store and I say, if that candy bar is $1 and I'll give you 75 cents, I realize that's a form of bargaining, but by God, if it's my candy bar, I don't have to give it to you for 75 cents. And I very strongly believe that that is an element which has been missing from collective bargaining, which is the basic premise that it's the board's money until the boards agree to give it. So we did not bargain them down from 3.5. They bargained us up to 2.5.
It's maybe, you know, and I don't know how fruitful it will be for you and I. to
Well,
be able
I'm
to
done,
wait for
I'm
the
done.
next.
That's my
Okay.
point, is it's difficult for me to see what the quid pro quo was. You know, I know what we gave up. What did we get?
Let me add, you know, just a little more about the whole process that we went through. We looked at the salaries in nearby districts. We looked at all of the surrounding areas. We wanted to be comparable. We wanted to be competitive. We're hearing that we're losing people, that we're having trouble attracting people. And for all the things that people have gone through for the last 2 years with COVID, there are many ways in which we can look at this. But I think from a practical business point of view, this agreement allows us to at least be competitive with nearby districts, not as high as Brattleboro, that community, but still a reasonable compensation level. The latest agreement, Priscilla, the Brattleboro, you know, and that group was a little bit higher. But at any rate, you know, we took a lot of things into consideration in the whole process. And I feel good about it. And I think it's a strong statement in recognition, albeit 2 years later, for all the hard work of our educators.
June,
How many steps are there? Number 3 says each returning teacher will be placed at the next subsequent step. We've had some teachers here for 30 plus years. Is there a max cutoff? And then what happens to them?
Right, the steps go from 4 to 18. That's the top. And Andy, can you answer the second part of that question?
So what happens to them is there's no longevity piece or anything of that nature, so they would just get the 2.5% increase, correct? Unless they were to go through some schooling and have more credits, like, so they have a bachelor's and then they get more credits, so they move to the next column. And so then that would move them over a column, which would increase because those steps change, or those dollar amounts change.
Jason,
Just two things. I want to say thank you for doing it. It's a hard work. And you're right. People have waited a long time. And you know, it's not easy. And what is so when you say steps, it's 2.5% plus steps. So like, what is a step? Is it an additional 3%?
1.8, we think.
So it's technically they're getting 6.5%.
4.3.
4.3 total.
Total new money. That's how it's.
Okay.
That's correct.
And I know we worked hard on doing stuff with that. Can I come back? I lost what I was gonna say, but thank you.
anyone else got any questions for Cheryl? June?
I have just one down on the November 2nd, the term life insurance increase. What was it?
10.
It was 10.
Term life, 10,000 for many, many years. Priscilla, do you have that figure?
I don't happen to have how many years with me, but the total cost for all the districts and the supervisor union for that life insurance increase, is that what you asked for?
I was just wondering what it was.
Listen to this, it's $1,846 total. That's spread between all of the districts. And probably approximately, because we have about the same number of teachers here as Rockingham, I think, it's probably around between $500 and $600 cost to the high school district. Really low amounts to give them that increase.
June, I just looked at the salary changes you had pulled out a long time ago, 30 years at 10,000.
Okay, thank you. I didn't pick that one up tonight.
No action needs to be taken.
You need to vote
need
to approve it.
To approve all that work you did.
Health insurance, we have no ability to control anymore. It used to be part of our negotiations. When I first started teaching here, it was 100% paid. Now the state
Okay, that's
has
enough
it
said about that.
80%. It's an 80%.
Enough,
But we don't
enough.
control it.
June, would you make me a motion to, how you want this just ratification of teachers' contracts?
Sure, as chair to sign.
I make a motion to ratify of the teachers' contracts
And authorize your chair.
and authorize my chair to sign it.
Thank you.
Second.
We've heard from Cheryl. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to add before we go to vote? Once, twice, three, okay, let's go. Margot,
Yes.
Deb,
Nay.
Pam,
Oh,
Yes.
wow.
yeah, June,
Yes.
Jason,
Yes, absolutely.
David,
I am abstaining, Molly.
Brenda,
Yes.
Priscilla,
Yes.
6 yes. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
8B, we've already taken care of. 8C, ideas on sign in front of building. I don't know if we have to beat that up too much tonight, but I would like to do something about something nice in front of the building. Other than that, vinyl sign that's been up there since 2015. Presentation is 98% of what we do. That's what my father used to tell us. Don't leave the broken down tractor up in front of the barn.
Right, well, hopefully we're gonna get another one to replace it.
No,
Not
we
with
are
the
going to
same-
get something.
Not with the same writing on it, not with the same writing on it. Yeah.
All right. If anybody has any great ideas or artistic capabilities, please send them to Mr. Broadley. We have a student matter that we're gonna have to go into executive session for, correct?
Sure, yeah, won't take long.
Okay, so let's move on to date and times of the next agenda. Next agenda is April 11th at 6:30. We are going to have a building and grounds at 5:30 that day. I had a lot of stuff sent to me for things to put on the agenda. So I didn't get them all on because I don't do well after about 8:30 and I think it's already there. So I want to just, if there's any public listening, on the April 11th agenda, we already have school board retreat on there, teacher roster, Heritage Mills. I've invited the gentleman from Heritage Mills to come in and give us a 10-15 minute speak about just what he does, because he sent a letter, wasn't very clear what he was really looking for. So I asked him to come in and talk to us. Masking was something someone wanted to talk about. And then when I was at the Haver grant committee meeting, I met one of the science teachers who was very concerned about her labs. Excuse me. So she is going to present to us and give us a tour of the science labs. So that's for April 11th. On April.
All their GoPros.
Yep. And on April 25th, we have asked the athletic director to please give us a presentation on what he does, what a day in his job looks like here, and just get a better idea of what he does. So we're gonna move to director's comments before we go to executive session. So I'm gonna start with Margot, director's comments.
I'm all set, thank you.
Deb,
Seeing as we've been in this for 2 and 3/4 hours, I'm done. Thank you.
Pamela,
I echo Margot and Deborah. Have a good night concerning everything else.
June,
I would just like to caution everybody about the BLM flags. I have 6 kids and I've been a very active parent in this district for 25 years now. They're involved in sports year round and I have never once witnessed any prejudice towards anyone. And that being said, Putney did a Black Lives mural on the road, and that brought a lot of attention, unwanted attention to it. People were being threatened, and I strongly feel that if we allow this, it's going to bring attention, where the wrong kind of attention to this matter that we don't want. And that's, thank you.
Thank you. Jason?
I was shocked to hear that this particular school does not do the Pledge of Allegiance every day. And all the other schools, but I think Westminster does not as well. But the central school, the middle school, and I'm not sure about Saxon's River, but they do the Pledge of Allegiance every day. And you know, and you really gotta, some of the people in the public mentioned it and I mentioned it, but if you really say the word slowly, you know, indivisible with liberty and justice for all, that encompasses everybody, in my opinion. And we say the pledge is a way to unite us under one common umbrella. And I am for these things, and I am for the United States, and I am, you know, I am for all of those things. I'm for everybody, you know, and thank you.
David?
Well, first I want to say that Cheryl gave us the perfect definition of what a conflict of interest in negotiations looks like. Because as you very sagely pointed out, Cheryl, you looked at contracts from surrounding districts, and by the G, Green Mountain surrounds us and we surround them. Having said that, I still am supportive of Pamela Johnson Spurlock is our representative, because I believe that she will follow her conscience and settle some reasonable money on Paris. That's item 1. Item 2, when I asked the question about what did we get out of the collective bargaining agreement, I'll tell you what we didn't get. We have left a very large parking place at bachelor's step 18 for teachers who do not care to improve their skills and pedagogy. And in fact, we have tacitly reinforced that mindset by giving them 2.5% on top of step 18 bachelor's. When we were in early stages of negotiations, there was a serious discussion at the table that we encourage what is known as column movement, which would mean that teachers would gain more education, more skills, and which in theory at least make them better teachers. And the notion was that we might actually cap bachelor's at step maybe 7 instead of step 18, so that if a teacher wanted more money, they could, of course, hope for a favorable contract settlement like the one they just got, or they would avail themselves of the money that we supply teachers with to continue their education and improve their skills, thereby we hope improving student outcomes. So I'm disappointed that I don't see a whole lot of gain in collective bargaining for the boards, but I do see the gain for the teachers. And by the way, when John Paulson walks off with $6 billion in personal income in the year 2008 and tanks the economy while he's doing it, yeah, I do think it's an uneven playing field. But the bottom line is, unlike Essa money, this community pays those teacher salaries. And that, by the way, brings me down to the Essa money, because the consequence of not having a thoughtful and candid discussion in public among the boards as to what we thought about ESSER bonuses was you got the motion, pardon me, the amendment that you got tonight from me, making the point that maybe we hadn't spent a whole lot of time really considering what the implications of ESSER bonuses were. I'm not disappointed that the board did not accept my amendment, and I fully understand the points that were made, that it would cause, shall we say, more consideration to be paid on the part of the boards who had already rubber stamped it at $1,000, but nonetheless, I think that helped make a point. And lastly, it made an interesting point to me, which is the great willingness that we have to spend money when we think it's not ours. I'm talking about ESSER. Thank you, Molly.
Thank you. Brenda, please.
Yes, I will comment also on the issue today, the BLM flag. And I was conflicted in my vote because I heard the policy and procedure thoughts come up. And I had received a message, an email message or something, a couple of weeks ago asking me as a board member if I was aware of the BLM flag being suggested to be at our school. And I said I was not aware of that. And I wasn't really aware of it till we got the agenda. And this particular person said that there was something signed in the school, passed around in the school sign. I did not realize it was a petition, but I guess it was okay because it was a petition signed or initiated by a student. Because I believe in the policy, if I had understood it, you could not do things that was not under, like the parents were knowledgeable of, the students weren't able to be proselyted, I guess, or I don't know what the word would be, but to do something unless it was a fair knowledge. But I guess because it is student initiated and more of a petition, it kind of didn't fall into that policy procedure bracket. But I was disconcerted to get that email and know about it and did not know how to comment on it. So when it did come to the agenda, my problem with the flag was that it represents a movement. And so I voted no, but I also wanted to vote yes, because I believe we need to have policy and procedure for these things, especially when we're gonna set a precedent. But that being said, this is my quote of me. If we continue to push equity, we will lose our diversity. At some point we can't have both. So we need to think about that, because it's different is not a bad thing. Different is on purpose. And so when we start to say, well, you're different than this person or this group, so we're going to say you are diverted from at the expense of another. We can't do that because we just defeated our whole purpose. So I just think it's kind of like an oxymoron. Like you have to walk a balancing of equity and diversity, and you have to celebrate differences. And so you have to walk. And when you're in a collective group of people, that has to be done a certain way, and it cannot be done by something outside of policy procedure, and it cannot be done second precedence. So I believe I'm just to my point of the movement. They changed their mission statement in 2020, but they were against a nuclear family, and as a community, I believe, and as an academics place, I believe we support family and community in academics. And academics is not, I don't know, I raised 4 children and now I have 6 grandchildren, but I don't want somebody else to raise them for me. I am proud of being a part of raising human beings. I don't care what color they are, or what religion they are, or how they're employed, or any of those categories. They are human beings. And we need to treat each other, to your comment all the time, which I said something about one time. But we do need to treat each other. We can't legislate that. We can't politicize that. I mean, I'm a minister for 40 some years. It didn't work well for the church when we did that. People don't come to church now because they were told what to do and how to do it and why to do it. And they said, okay, then we're not going to go there anymore. I understand. And so for school, it should be a welcoming place. And for communities, we should be welcoming, but we should have common sense and common courtesy. And we should not lose our diversity.
Priscilla.
I appreciate Cheryl and her coming and spending the evening explaining to our board what the negotiation team came up with in the end. I know that the negotiation team looked at research behind different ideas and came up with the kind of contract that satisfied that research to make our teachers supported, but also encourage them to be educated and when they needed to be. We looked at all different kinds of research when we did that and came up with what we thought was best. I appreciate the board's support for the contract this evening. Many issues were covered this evening, and I appreciate all the ideas that you have shared. Each of you has different ideas, each board member, and I appreciate hearing those and listening to those. We don't always agree, but by listening, we learn and we know things that go forward. It kind of helps our thinking. It makes us aware of the things that are out there that maybe we need to deal with, because there are many issues. Kindness and consideration is learned and continues to spread out in all directions with no end. So I encourage you to remain considerate, share that kindness. Staff needs to share that. Families need to share that so that children learn that, and we can make the best children and bring them up the best that we can so that they can become good family members, good community members, and be the kind of people that we want to interact with. So continue to share with someone every day that kindness. Thank you.
Robert's Rules of Order played out tonight fairly well. I am a little concerned on how things turned out, because I think that young lady was looking for an answer. I think our public was looking for an answer. And so, that didn't happen tonight, which I think the only reason that probably, whether the vote went yes or no, you had a lot of public here that were really looking for some kind of answer. And you had a young lady who put on a presentation and stood up right up next to men and answered them and did a pretty good job. And I think when they all left here tonight, they probably really wish they'd had an answer. So really what we did tonight is, just to be clear, we did not allow for the flag to be flown, but we didn't say yes or no. So I just want everybody to understand that and to realize what we did tonight was not let that young lady go home with an answer tonight, or I didn't count them, but there must have been 25, 30 people here. So just sometimes we have to make a decision whether we're uncomfortable with it or not. And I think we dodged it tonight. And I get that probably I'm that person that does things that makes people uncomfortable sometimes, but sometimes you have to make those decisions. That's, people put us on this board not to always say yay, but to do the right thing, or to do what you think is right. You're one member of a 9 or 10 member board. So thank everyone. We need to go into executive session. And we're going into executive session because it's going to place the student and or the administration at a disadvantage if we do not. Can I have a motion to go there?
So moved.
And